Welcome to Measurably Better Learning, the podcast built for learning and development professionals. Whether you're an instructional designer, L&D professional, or corporate leader, get ready for insights and ideas that will transform your approach to learning, training, and development. So let's dive in.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Measurably Better podcast. I'm Miriam Taylor, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Jerry Zanstra. And today we are talking about challenges when developing global learning. And Jerry, first of all, we should provide some context. What is your experience in global learning? What do you mean by global? That can mean a lot of things to a lot of people.
It can. So take a picture of the globe, right? You pretty much have it covered. Personally, for me, there was a period of my life where I spent a great deal of time traveling and teaching and lecturing in, I think, more than 30 countries. One time on an airplane, I got bored, and I just started. Mary said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just writing out all the countries that I've been." And it was more than 30. It was maybe been more than 35.
Wow.
And the lectures and what I was teaching were similar. How they applied in those particular settings, very different. They had different. It was on economics and public policy, and the challenges that they faced were unique to them. To their culture, even regions in their countries. A lot of it was in sub-Saharan Africa, Europe, South America, partly in Central America. And so wherever I went, what I was teaching, the concepts were the same, the application varied. And so for me to understand somebody else's challenges, this was 20 to 25 years ago. And so the internet was relatively new, but I could read their newspapers online. In some cases, I could watch some movies online. So I would prep, and for weeks before I went to work in Kenya, for instance, I would read the editorial page every day in the two. There were two, the Standard and the Daily Nation, I think. But I would read those two editorials just to see what people were talking about.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I learned to do that because otherwise people would have no idea what I was talking about.
Right, and it was no value to them then.
No, and professionally, most of our clients are global. And the reason why they are global is because we offer two services. One is custom learning development, and the other, obviously, is translation and localization. And most of the time, global companies need to have at least two companies, suppliers,
right? Yeah,
doing that work, whereas we're able to do it in-house, and we understand both sides equally well. We have expertise in both sides. And so the unique challenges there are many, many-fold. How do you know if this is actually a global need?
That's a great question.
And oftentimes your headquarters is in Belgium, and in Belgium you're having this particular difficulty. It doesn't mean you're having that particular difficulty everywhere. And so people that are in Argentina might be saying, what are we doing?
Why do we have to take this training? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
So where is this needed? What objectives, what problems are you trying to solve? There's obviously translation issues. I think for most global companies that we see, and you see the same thing I do, the words along the bottom of the screen are really not our best effort.
Right.
Is that the way to say it?
That's a good way to put it. They've been auto-generated somewhere because we had to check a box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's obviously one thing, but there's so many other factors. When we do a needs analysis, we look at what's the education level, a whole bunch of demographics. What's the age? What's the experience, right? Where did they come from? And so that can vary when you're thinking about a persona, the person for whom you're creating this learning. You better make sure that you've got personas for different regions of the world because their needs are different, where they come from, the language, the culture, the colors, the right to left, left to right reading.
Yeah, that's a huge one alone, yeah.
all of those things. So yeah, all of those things are factors. It's complicated.
Well, and even within, we talk about, for example, like translating and localizing for Portuguese. Okay, that's great for the language if you're in, but then the question is that European Portuguese? Or are we talking about, a subgroup within Africa who's speaking Portuguese? And what is that? Or in Brazil, like what does that look like? And so there's and we're going to, on this podcast, we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about global challenges because there certainly are a lot of them.
And I there's one other thing to mention before we go to break. It's a fallacy that if your company is located in one country, you don't have a multicultural or language issue.
Right. Yes.
The difference between somebody, let's pick somebody from Kenya who's lived here for 10 years, is that might not be the culture they grew up with, but they're familiar with it because they've lived here. Versus somebody who's in Kenya who has never been to Europe or never been to the United States, knows very little of that particular culture. So I don't think there are any instances where languages and cultures are not considerations. It's more of a depth. How deep do you need to go? The Kenyan living in the United States might understand you. The Kenyan who has never been to the United States doesn't understand you at all. And so you need to go deeper and be, I think, more sensitive to that.
I love that analogy, and that's when we come back from break, we're going to talk specifically about instructional design in that context, but I really like the thought of it always has to be a question, but the question is to what degree? How deep do we need to consider these issues? So great, thank you. We'll be right back.
Imagine a world where every training session, every learning module, and every translated document is aligned with your company's unique goals and global ambitions. Welcome to Ingenuity, where we don't just talk about elevating your corporate learning, we make it happen. At Ingenuity, we understand the heart of your business is its people. That's why we specialize in creating custom learning solutions and translation services that are not just effective, but are designed specifically for your business's global needs. Let us show you how learning cannot be just better, but measurably better, with solutions tailored just for you. Learn more in the description below.
Well, welcome back. When we left for break, we were considering the depth to which we need to consider these global challenges. Some of that, of course, has gotten added in a needs assessment. But let's talk more practically. We've talked globally, shall I say, about global issues. It's a terrible pun, but
I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right. But let's look specifically now as we think about developing training materials for a global audience. What are things instructional designers in particular, learning architects, what do they need to think about as they're designing for this audience?
I think so. Think about one location in the United States and it's got 1,500 employees all in one place. The instructional designers, if they're located there, which they probably would be, have relationships. If they have a question, they can literally walk over to a line manager and say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Should it be this or that? Does this solve your problem? Or does it? And you have all these relationships built in. You have at the managerial level, maybe at the VP level, in the C-suite, you might have relationships. In a global company, you have those relationships in your own location, but you don't have them. You don't know the lead operation person in Brazil, but you should.
Exactly. But can you give us some ideas on how to build those relationships? Because that can be, you can think you have a relationship because you've been emailing back and forth, but you still don't really know anything about it.
Yeah, I think the surveys is one way, right? That's a good base. It's quantitative. You can get some data and you can look at that, and those will give you insights. I think the relationships, though, help verify what you're seeing in surveys, and I think as you build those relationships, they get more honest.
Yes, that's very true.
So it may be that once a month you have a standing call, or every 6 weeks or whatever cycle it is. The people leading up the learning team have regular calls. They're bouncing ideas off of people. They're getting feedback. Hey, the course you just gave us, you guys really missed it here. It was terrible.
Sure.
This, we have no idea what you're talking about. That over there, oops, it was offensive. You didn't know that. I think having those relationships really mattered. I mentioned in the first part traveling a lot in Kenya, and I got to know the editor of one of those newspapers. I had emailed him a question and say, hey, I'm coming, and I don't understand that I'm reading this, but I don't understand what's going on. And through that, we developed a relationship, and the next time I was there, I spent a whole day with him. Yeah. Fascinating guy in Mombasa, Kenya, and incredibly helpful for me to get local knowledge. Obviously, for both the designers and the developers, you're watching language and scripts. You're watching for humor that's not going to fly. You're watching for idioms. Those are pretty common things. Colors, signs, all sorts of things like that. Both of us have worked on articles and ebooks that people can find on our website that can be good resources with a list of things to pay attention to. But I still come back to the relationship piece because agreed. I've learned, again, reading the newspapers is great. If your company's got a location in India, the next 5 movies you watch should all be from Bollywood. And if they are, you'll learn a ton about their culture and how they think and how stories flow, and how things are. Read reviews of the movies too, but how things fit together and how the culture works, how people speak to one another. Those are powerful things to learn, and lots of fun ways to learn them.
Yeah, those are great. I appreciate those practical suggestions. And I know one thing we both done, but a few times working on projects with global clients is we can and always do use, stock photo or whatever the situation is. We adapt it, but there's something, and we just did this with a training course we developed. There's something, I'm not sure whether it gets at pride of culture, but when you say to them, hey, we'd really like to use, real photos, whether they're from, the plant that you're working in or the company, or even just culturally, restaurants, whatever it might be. And it doesn't always work like that, but to have the opportunity to say, can we have some of those? Here's what we need. This is what, but all of a sudden you get an insight, a window into like, here's my favorite restaurant, here's why, and it opens up that conversation in kind of a fun way. And
for the learner, I mean, imagine now you are in India and you see a photograph, not of the headquarters that's in Belgium, but you actually see your own physical location. And by the way, they just tossed up a picture of somebody you work with or a restaurant that you go to, and suddenly you're included.
Yes,
and that's what we're trying to get to.
Yes,
this was built for me. It should matter to me. It was personalized to me, and I can identify. I can connect to it.
I see myself.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time. We're actually going to, as you know, we're going to have another podcast where we're going to deal a little bit more practically with solutions. But I think this has been a great conversation at what some of the global challenges are, and then how the design team in particular can think about mitigating some of those challenges, and really maybe not mitigating, maybe the word is leaning into them and developing a better, more effective learning experience. So thank you.
Great.
Before we wrap up the show, if you're looking to dive deeper, we've got tons of free downloads, L&D resources, and details about upcoming webinars that you won't want to miss. They're found in the episode description. Plus, if you ever want to chat with either one of us, now's your chance. You can find links in the episode description to connect directly with Miriam or me. We're here to answer your questions and to discuss all things learning and development. And speaking of questions, we love hearing from you. Whether it's a question or a comment or a topic you're curious about, or if you just want to join the conversation, drop us a comment on your favorite social media channel. Your input shapes our shows. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. It's the best way to ensure you never miss out on our latest episode. We're excited to continue to transform learning into a measurable success with you. Until next time.